UFC Vegas 52 is almost here. I'm going to give you my final picks. I'll share a lot of props with you, like round props and method of victory, and I'm also going to build some lineups, so make sure you watch until the end. You can call me Kunith. Let's make some money this week. If you haven't yet, go back and watch the video from earlier in the week. That'll give you a good base of knowledge coming into this. That's basically like the pasta underneath the chicken in a chicken parm. And in this video, we'll talk about any changes that have happened to the card. We'll talk about what we need to do to be successful, and obviously lineup construction as well. Let's get it. First change to the card that I want to address is Manel Kape. He popped for something and he had the response that all athletes do. I don't know what happened. I don't know what I took. But I know stuff like that can actually happen. I'm just poking fun at Manel Kape, but we do have him off of this card, which is unfortunate because this card can use all the help it could get. Another change that we have to the slate is they have added the Evan Elder and the Preston Parsons fight. Both of these guys are making their UFC debut this week, and they both have the same price on DraftKings. This is lined as a pretty close fight. Currently, at the time of recording this, Preston Parsons is a slight favorite, and that does make sense to me. We have a few things working against Evan Elder this week. He's making his UFC debut, he's undefeated, which is always scary. See Omar Gadziev last week. And he's primarily a striker. On the other side, we have Preston Parsons, who has a UFC fight under his belt. It's a loss to Daniel Rodriguez, where he was finished late in round 1, but we'll look at that as a learning experience. And I say look at that as a learning experience because D-Rod is an absolute dog, and I think he is a much tougher task than Evan Elder, so I do think that Preston Parsons is going to have some success this week, at least more than he had in his UFC debut. And this is a classic striker versus grappler matchup. You have Preston Parsons, who has 9 pro wins, all by way of submission, and Evan Elder, who again is primarily looking to keep it on the feet. He's not going to try to mix it up on the mat, at least not willingly, with Preston Parsons in this spot. So in a striker versus grappler matchup, who do we choose? Say it with me. Say it with me. 1, 2, 3, grappler. Good job. I heard you say it. I heard you. Give me some. Right now, Preston Parsons is a slight favorite, so you are looking at a situation where he's the same price on DraftKings as his opponent, but he is favored in terms of Vegas betting lines, so that's one thing to pay attention to this week. I do think that Preston Parsons gets it done. I do think that he finds the submission at some point. Give me Preston Parsons inside the distance. He's a decent play on DraftKings because of that upside. We also have Alexandr Romanov back on this card, which is awesome. He's 9,600 this week, which is an extremely high price, but it may be worth it. He was supposed to fight Tanner Boser originally. Now Chase Sherman will be stepping in on short notice. Romanov destroys Chase Sherman in this fight. I don't think you need me to tell you that. We saw Chase Sherman in his last UFC fight before he was cut, I believe. I feel like he was cut and maybe they called him back because they needed somebody to keep Romanov on the card. But in his last fight, he fought Jake Collier, who was able to take him down and submit him. It was just a poor performance, a very, very bad look. I don't think that Chase Sherman is UFC caliber. His one win in the UFC recently is against another guy who's on this card, Ike Villanueva, who also really isn't UFC caliber either. I'm sure you already know this, but on this side, Alexandr Romanov is a beast. He's undefeated in the UFC. Most of his fights look like a bear mauling an unsuspecting father on a camping trip. So he should roll here, but this fight is tough. This fight is tough. Not for Alexandr Romanov, but for us. And it's tough because he's 9,600, which is a lot. Now, if he goes out there and secures one takedown and quickly gets a TKO finish or submission in the first round, that actually caps his upside a little bit. I would hope that Chase Sherman could try to work his way up to the feet so that we can get maybe another takedown and extend this later into the first round, but there's a good chance that doesn't happen. So here's the tricky part with the allocation of salary. You have Alexandr Romanov, who's 9,600, and then you have Dean Barry, who's 9,500, both with great matchups. So it makes things a little bit tricky for you on this card, but
good news, everyone!
There are a few value plays at 8,000 and below that we can attack to be able to actually play both of them, and I'll show you what that looks like later, but first I'll go through the value plays, starting with Claudio Puelles at 8,000. Claudio Puelles, he's going to be fighting Clay Guida this week. I think this is a good spot for El Nino just because Clay Guida is really not that dangerous anymore. Yes, he had the recent finish over Leonardo Santos, but at the same time, Leonardo Santos is 42, gassed really hard, and was kicking Clay's ass for that first round, nearly finished him. Now you're looking at a situation where he's fighting a much younger guy, somebody who's still learning, somebody who's still getting a lot better as well. in Claudio Puelles. And Puelles is coming into this on a 4-fight winning streak, most recently beating Chris Gritzmacher in a fight where he was doing very well early, not so great late until he was able to find a submission, so take that with a grain of salt. But what was really impressive to me is 10 minutes of control time against Jourdain Levitt. Now, Jourdain Levitt did gas out a little bit in that fight, but we also know that Jourdain Levitt can fight tired, especially if it's grappling heavy. So I think that that is a huge feather in the cap of Claudio Puelles, and that's a win that's going to look better and better the more that we see Jourdain Levitt twerking on these guys in the future. You see here in the fight before that, almost 3 whole rounds of control time. That is absurd, but this guy is a wet blanket. He's like Velcro. Once he gets on you, it's hard to get him off. And you have Clay Guida on the other side who may look to shoot for takedowns himself, and he may find himself in a bad position with Claudio Puelles on his back. Now, I will say Clay obviously is notoriously tough to finish, and he's also somebody who's really active on the feet, but he's not really doing anything on the feet. He moves his head a lot, he's darting into the pocket a lot, he's throwing a lot of strikes, but there's not really much on them. Most of them don't land, and he was outstruck largely by Mark Madsen. So I think that Claudio Puelles, while notoriously isn't the best striker, I think that he's not going to be outmatched on the feet, and I think if this fight hits the ground, he is at an advantage, at least in the first 2 rounds. Now, we may see him slow down a little bit, and Clay Guida we know will never slow down, so it's tough to want to back him just because endurance is one of the biggest indicators of who's going to win when it comes to MMA. But lately, I've really been trying to do my best to look at just who's the better fighter, take the better fighter, and hope for the best, and that's what I'm doing with Claudio Puelles in this spot. I think we have the much better fighter at 8,000. Maybe Clay Guida 10 years ago was a better fighter, but at this stage, he's just a guy who moves around a lot, doesn't really put much on his punches, may shoot for takedowns, isn't really threatening the finish all that often. I like Claudio Puelles this week. I think that he gets it done by way of decision, but I do think that he racks up a lot of control time because that's just what he does, and there's solid value here at 8,000. Next value play I'm looking at is Lando Venata coming back at 7,700. Here's the reason why I like Lando. This is down at 145 pounds, which is awesome. I know I talked about this a little bit in the first video, but I want to touch on it again. I remember years ago, Lando Venata was being interviewed and somebody asked, will you ever move down to featherweight? And his response to that was that he tried to make 145 once and nearly died. So he was not looking to do that ever again. There's no way that he's going to make 145. Fast forward years later, and he did it comfortably against Mike Grundy, and he's probably going to make weight comfortably here against Charles Jourdain, which, I mean, that is a much better division for him. So that tells you that he's taking everything seriously. He's taking the dieting seriously, he's taking the weight cut seriously, and he's being smart about this as well. So if he's smart in those areas, I hope that he's smart in other areas, like, for example, looking to get this fight to the ground. Charles Jourdain is one-dimensional. He wants to strike, and while he's an electrifying striker when he's clicking on all cylinders, I don't think that he's going to be able to outstrike Lando Venata. We know that notoriously, Lando's pretty damn good on the feet. But I think that Lando can use his wrestling in this spot like we've seen him do in the past and be able to fight a smart enough game plan to steal rounds with the wrestling, get a decent amount of points from a DraftKings perspective by securing 3 to maybe 4 takedowns in the fight. And this is probably going to be one of the higher owned fighters on the slate just because I think we have the better fighter here at 7,700, and also he makes a lot of things work with your lineup. I could see people going the other way and playing Charles Jourdain just because he looked good in his last performance against Andre Ewell, but Andre Ewell's weak, man. It's not the same. He's got a much tougher task on his hands against Lando Venata, who has fought much higher level competition as well. So I like Groovy Lando this week. I like Full Camp Lando this week. If you know, you know. And at 7,700, I think he's excellent value, and I do see myself putting him in a lot of my lineups as I've been trying to build them throughout the week. Next, we're looking at the Beverly Hills Ninja, and this is somebody who you always look at because most of the time he's going to come in as the underdog, and he's going to come in at a lower price, and you know that finishing upside is always going to be there. In my opinion, Jordan Wright has some of the most underrated striking and striking power that we have in the division, and I think a lot of that just has to do with his durability issues. We know that he doesn't take a punch necessarily all that well. We know that he doesn't fight late all that well. We really don't even see him fight late, so it's hard to say that. But you're looking at a situation where a guy is all action for the first 5 minutes, and either he's getting finished finished or he's finishing his opponent more often than not. I think that he gets the finish in this spot. Marc-Andre Barriault got basically 360 no-scoped by Chidi Njokuani, and Chidi Njokuani is not exactly a guy who's knocking everybody out. And I really am not worried about Marc-Andre Barriault's durability. I'm more so worried about just the likelihood of him getting hit, because notoriously he doesn't move his head very well. He tends to walk forward on a straight line. He has a very simple striking approach on the feet. And Jourdain Wright will just throw things straight down the pipe. He's got that karate stance, so sometimes it's hard to gauge that if you're not used to that. And I think he creates some real issues for Barriault on the feet. So I like Jourdain Wright this week. The Glass Cannon, the Beverly Hills Ninja, whatever you want to call him, I like him this week, and I think he's excellent value at 7,600, just because if he wins, probably a first round knockout. So if you're capturing win condition at his price, you're going to need him on your lineup, because if he wins, he shows up on the winning lineup, no question about it. And now my last value play is actually the underdog in the main event, Amanda Lemos. I know a lot of people are going with Andrade, and it makes sense. It does. And like we talked about in the video earlier in the week, I think if this fight goes the distance, the whole 25 minutes, then yes, Jessica Andrade probably wins. If this fight is finished in the first 3 rounds, it's because Amanda Lemos knocked her out. We can't sleep on the power and the precision that she has, especially early in fights. And Jessica Andrade, she is hittable. If you look at all these knockdowns that she has, I mean, she could put you in a position where she scores a ton of points. She makes a lot of things work in your lineup at only 7,300. She's going to be the longer, taller fighter, and I think that that's going to serve her really well when Andrade looks to close distance. And Jessica Andrade, I mean, she's really only lost to the best of the best, like the likes of Weili Zhang, Rose Namajunas, Valentina Shevchenko. But just because she's recently lost to the best of the best doesn't mean that she's unbeatable by any stretch. I could think of a handful of situations, like look at almost everybody who lost to John Jones in a title fight. After they lose, they go downhill, because you're knocking on the door of a title. Like, where does Jessica Andrade get a title shot? You can make the case for a third fight against Thug Rose just because they're 1-1 and their last fight was pretty competitive. Now, I don't know if we're going to see Joanna Jędrzejczyk fight anytime soon, but if you think about it, the top of the division is Thug Rose, Weili, let's say Joanna Jędrzejczyk. These are all fighters that have beaten Andrade. And look at the Weili Zhang fight. I mean, Weili hits her once and sends her across the octagon and then finishes her quickly. So that shows us that she's hittable. She's not indestructible. She has 9 professional losses as it is, and I think we could see her catch another L this weekend against Amanda Lemos, who's been surging through the division. Granted, she hasn't fought the absolute best that the division has to offer, but she did have a hard fight with Angela Hill. She can learn a lot from that experience. I expect us to see the best version of Amanda Lemos this week, and the best version of Amanda Lemos beats the best version of Jessica Andrade, in my opinion. And again, at 7,300, she makes a lot of things work for your lineup. So I'll show you what that looks like now. If we come down here, start putting in Amanda Lemos, we have really a lot of things that we can do. I want to start by showing you what I was alluding to earlier, where if you wanted to play Alexandr Romanov and Dean Barry in the same lineup, you still have a decent amount of salary, but you know you're going to be going with dogs or close to it throughout. So if I come down here and I grab Jourdain Wright, if I come down here and I grab Lando Venata, I've got 8,300 left over. That can get you up to Sergey Khandozhko, who honestly, I'm not really interested in touching the Khandozhko Grant fight. And the reason why I say that is just because Dwight Grant is not that great. He's 37. He doesn't fight well later in the fight. He doesn't grapple. And Sergey Khandozhko doesn't really push a pace either. Like, this could be one of those patty cake kind of matches where nobody's really doing all that much. And from a DraftKings perspective, the winner scores 59 points. So that's a fight that I probably stay away from. Like Guida, I do prefer the other side of that matchup. And then you're looking at Evan Elder, who could totally win. He could totally score a knockout. The guy is talented. But I prefer the other side with Preston Parsons at 8,100. So you can get that finishing upside, get that submission upside. Now, if you wanted to come down from Preston Parsons, you wanted to grab somebody like Claudio Puelles, you could get away with that. This lineup is extremely different. This is something that you could put in one of the bigger contests and possibly be that 1% lineup, because You're looking at Amanda Lemos, who's going to come in vastly lower owned than Jessica Andrade. It's going to be tough for people to want to play Romanov and Barry in the same lineup, not because they don't want to, but because they might not be able to with the salary. If most people are looking to play Jessica Andrade, then they're not going to be able to afford both of these fighters here who have much better matchups. I do expect Jourdain Wright and Lando Venata to pull a decent amount of ownership because of their win conditions, because of their paths to victory, because of their matchups, and because of their price. And then Claudio Puelles, I don't think anybody's playing Claudio Puelles this week, and he could be somebody who sneakily gets you 85, 86 points, and that might be enough to win it for you if you have something like this in your lineup as well. Now, let's say you wanted to play Jessica Andrade, just because I know a lot of you probably will, and I don't think that's a bad thing. But if you play Jessica Andrade, you've got 8220 left over. So you're probably only allowed to play one of these guys, and you might just decide to go with Dean Barry just because he's not the most expensive fighter on the slate, and you'd prefer to save as much salary as possible for the rest of your positions. I expect this to be a pretty common, pretty popular combination here. And if I come down here, again, I do expect a lot of people to get to Lando Venata just because of the matchup and the price. They might come down again to Jourdain Wright, matchup and price. Got 8,100 left over. They might come here to, say, Preston Parsons, and then they're going to play Guida. And this, really, I'm not crazy about this either. I think that if you were to approach it this way, you might want to take out Guida, might take out Preston Parsons, might take out Dean Barry, and do your best to target that mid-range instead, where you're looking at somebody like Marcin Prachnio, who's got a pretty favorable matchup against the guy in Felipe Lins, who we've seen finished time and time again prior to coming to the UFC. This leaves you with 8,700 left over. Qileng, sneaky play this week. The Mongolian murderer, as long as he is able to weather that storm that Cameron Else is going to bring in that first round, then he probably finishes him in the second or third and scores a decent amount of points because he's going to get a knockdown most likely, and then he's going to get the finish. So if he gets a knockdown, he gets a finish in the second round, that's 80 points plus whatever he does with takedowns, control time, and significant strikes. He could totally be a sneaky play that ends up breaking the slate that you'll need in your lineup. Now you're looking at a situation where you have 8,300 left over. You're playing the main event favorite, Marcin Prachnio by knockout, Lando Venata probably by decision. Jourdain Wright, if he wins, it's a first round knockout. Qileng, if he wins, it's a second or third round knockout. And this is one of the things that I wanted to talk about coming into this. I'm going to post some of these spots, some of these over-under spots on my Twitter, so make sure you follow Kunith MMA so that you could see those picks. But Qileng and Cameron Else, the over 1.5 looks like one of the best bets on the card just because Qileng is super tough. Cameron Else is not. So you're looking at a situation where Cameron Else is going to throw everything in the kitchen sink for the first 5 minutes. Then after that, Qileng is going to take over, probably finish him late second round. I think that the over 1.5 rounds is one of the best bets on the card. I also think Lando Venata by decision is one of the best bets on the card. The last time I looked at the line, it was plus 250. Lando Venata tends to go to decision a lot, and if you think he's going to win this week, that's a really good bet. And also Jourdain Wright by first round knockout. If you wanted to get that fight parlay, not just Jourdain Wright by knockout, not just Jourdain Wright first round, but you combine them. Jourdain Wright knockout in the first round, I think was plus 600. And if you wanted to hedge, you can come back with Marc-Andre Barriault by knockout as well. And then you could put yourself in a position where you'll make money either way because a knockout or TKO finish is going to be the most likely outcome in that fight one way or the other. But now with 8,300 left over, we're down here. You can afford Khandozhko, which would be a great way to get different. I don't think people are going to be clicking this button, but again, I don't think that he's going to score all that many points. And we're kind of in the same position as we were before where you're looking to target 1, 2, 3, one of these guys in this range. You either want a piece of the Evan Elder Preston Parsons fight, or you're hoping that Claudio Puelles is able to out-grapple Guida for at least 2 rounds. My favorite pick in this range is Preston Parsons, just because I like a fighter that can find a submission. I really do. This is not a bad way to attack it either. I think this is very sneaky with the Qileng pick. at Marcin Prachnio not playing Dean Barry or Alexandr Romanov. This is another one that you'd be able to put into a really big contest and have a decent chance at being different. Another way you can get different this week is just by trying to avoid the main event. If you avoid the main event, then you might be able to do some other things in your lineup. You can grab Tyson Pedro, who has the second best matchup on the entire card. Come back down to Prachnio, come back down to Parsons, come back down to Jourdain Wright. 8,300 left over. I think you could go with Claudio Puelles. And then you're up here where you have a situation where you could play Marc-Andre, you could play Charles Jourdain. I mean, you wouldn't play Barriault in this lineup specifically, but you could afford Charles Jourdain if you wanted to. And now you're looking at a situation where you have 100 left over. What I don't like about this, though, is that Tyson Pedro, a lot of question marks. I expect him to win, but it might not be the crazy dominant performance that we think. But at the same time, Villanueva only lets his opponents have crazy dominant performances. So if we just for a second peel this back, let's say I want to take, instead of Jourdain, I want to take Lemos. We have 1,300 left over, excuse me. See, this is something that you could do as well if you wanted to go the Amanda Lemos route. You have here Amanda Lemos, you've got grappling advantage here, grappling advantage here, grappling advantage here, potential grappling advantage here, and hopefully that first round knockout. So you'll notice that a lot of my lineups, they have the same couple of pieces, and that's what you should be doing. You should get a pool of players that you feel comfortable with, that you feel confident about, and use those moving forward when you're making your lineups, and then tinker with a couple of different combinations. Now with like the Evan Elder fight, they haven't added any props here yet. This line's starting to come back a little bit. It's at -125 now, but I do think this is the side that I'm going to end up on. You look at the Dean Barry, Mike Jackson fight, I think the under 1.5 rounds makes a ton of sense. Also, Dean Barry by knockout at -165 makes a lot of sense, but I think the under is the best way to attack this. You're obviously not going to lay that -1250, there's no way. Qileng, Cameron Else, again, I think the over 1.5 rounds makes a ton of sense at -145. I think that's one of the better bets on the card. But if you wanted to sweeten the deal a little bit and take Prachnio at +175 by knockout, I think that makes a ton of sense. Tyson Pedro, Villanueva, if you look here at fight doesn't go the distance, -650 for no, the fight doesn't go the distance. Obviously, Vegas expects a finish here, so do we. But if you want to go with a fight parlay, for example, and you wanted to take Tyson Pedro by first round submission at +240, I think that's a solid bet as well, just because that seems like the most likely outcome. He probably is just going to get a takedown, find Ike's back, get a rear naked choke, go home. Dwight Grant versus Sergey Khandozhko. I think if you come down here and you grab Khandozhko to win by decision at +175, I think that makes a lot of sense. Also, if you wanted to be a little bit safer about it and take the over, -185. Dwight Grant has gone to decision. He's gone to split decisions so many times, so I expect this fight to see the judges' scorecards as well. Maycee Barber versus Montana De La Rosa. The over is a little bit too high. It's at -255, so there's not a whole lot of meat on the bone unless you parlay that with something else. I think the smarter route is to go under 2.5 rounds at +190, just because you're hoping that Maycee Barber is able to knock her out. Very, very possible outcome here. It's just, I was breaking this down with a buddy of mine recently. Since the beginning of the year, over 70% of women's MMA fights that are scheduled for 3 rounds have gone the distance. So if you want to just attack the over 2.5 rounds with most women's MMA fights every time, you're going to be up. And honestly, now that I'm looking at it, if you're hoping that Maycee Barber is able to knock her out, and that's why you took the under 2.5, you might as well just take Maycee Barber by knockout at +330. I think that makes a lot of sense as well. Again, I'll show you here, Lando Venata. Last time I checked, Vannata by decision was +250. Look at this, +200. So money is coming in. People are starting to recognize that that line was a little bit off. Honestly, you've got Jourdain by decision, you've got Lando by decision. You can bet both of those and make money either way as long as this goes to the judges' scorecards. Something to consider. And then I'll give you one more just to see what we have. Oh, they won't show us. -1500 now. Goodness me. Well, when it opens up, Alexandr Romanov by submission in the first round is probably going to be your best bet, and that'll probably be lined at, if I had to guess, -150 or something like that. Not bad. Now I'll quickly go through the whole card for you. I like Preston Parsons. Look, it's already moving. It's already moving in the last 2 minutes. Dean Barry, which it's a crazy price. You don't even really need him in there, but let's just throw him in there just because. Marcin Prachnio, Qileng, Tyson Pedro, Sergey Khandozhko, Jourdain Wright, Maycee Barber, Lando Venata, Claudio Puelles, Alexandr Romanov. And then I just think that the main event is something that you probably shouldn't touch, but if you wanted to, Amanda Lemos at plus 46,000. I don't know if you guys can see on your phones, but if you wanted to do like a $25 bet, that's 11 grand. Not bad. My advice to you is if you did want to put together a big parlay this week, I would just get rid of the main event. I'd also get rid of the Sergey Khandozhko fight just because I think that could really go either way. And now you have 10 picks here at plus 9,100. Not bad. If you wanted to throw, say, a $30 bet on that, you're looking at a $2,700 payoff. I think that makes a lot of sense if you wanted to place one of these bigger, almost full card type of bets. But those are my picks. Thank you so much for watching. If you've made it to this point in the video, I really do appreciate it. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. That way I can bring more of this to you.